So this is 5 incredible folks talking about something I alluded to before, which is parenthood at work. And rather than bringing all 5 up at the same time, we're actually going to do an interview in the round. So person 1 is interviewing person 2, 2, 3, until we get to person 5, turning around and interviewing person 1, each with personal and professional stories about parenthood at work. It's been something we've been talking about doing for a while, and it's a topic that is near and dear and that I've started to hear bubbling up quite a lot more just in the last 9 months, maybe 18 months, this topic of parenthood at work, of how do you show up as somebody with children in your life, somebody who's thinking about having children in your life. Watching my own parents with my 6-year-old and 3-year-old nephew just fundamentally change, and change even in my relationship to my parents as a result of me having nephews, them having grandchildren. That's not something I've even ever shared with people I've worked with before, but it's a very important part of my life. And we have these things all throughout. There's so many stories associated with fertility, associated with raising kids, associated with being a grandparent that don't enter the workplace as a conversation, but impact how we show up at work. And so these 5 folks are each both personally and professionally deeply involved and invested in this conversation, each with very unique stories to tell. Again, the format is going to be first that Katelyn Holloway interviews Merritt, and then going through the list, Merritt, so Katelyn interviews Merritt, Merritt interviews Michael, Michael interviews Natasha, Natasha interviews Tammy, and then Tammy interviews Katelyn. And so it's going to be each person is conducting an interview and each person in return is being interviewed. We have a fun way of introducing each speaker rather than reading out a speaker bio. And each has a bio and a pedigree and a background that is very interesting and very impressive. But instead, we're going to have them share some words from somebody who's important to them in their life. This was Katelyn's proposal. And so I called up my 3-year-old and my 6-year-old nephew on FaceTime last week. I was really excited. I tried to describe this, and we spent 10 minutes telling knock-knock jokes. So my nephews just wouldn't stop. Knock, knock. Banana. Knock, knock. Banana. Knock, knock. Banana. Knock, knock. 10 minutes later, orange. Orange, you glad I didn't say banana? So it is my great pleasure to bring up our first 2 folks, Katelyn Holloway and Merritt Anderson.
How's that for a vulnerable opening? I'm going to drop something. I didn't think my mic was on. Let's get cozy, Merritt. Let's do this.
Okay, am I on? Yep, good.
Should we have people move in?
I know.
I feel like
get
you're out in the North
closer,
40.
more
I'm not going to be
intimate.
able to talk to you. Come on in. Scooch in here. And while you do that, so I am so excited to open up what is in this envelope. As Robin mentioned, we asked people that are important to us to write our intros and our bios for us. And so this one was done by Merritt's oldest with input and help from the 2 younger, yes?
Correct. Yes.
The exciting thing about this is Merritt actually has no idea what this says. So she will be hearing it for the first time with us. So hold on one moment. Drum roll, please. There we go.
The anticipation.
Thank you. Okay. Let's see. It's written on binder paper with a pencil. My kids aren't school age yet.
He's 9, so
Oh.
yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I'm glad that we each have our own box of tissues. So here we go.
All right, here we go.
Title: Merritt Anderson by Gus Anderson. If someone were to come up to me and ask me what my mom was about, I would tell them many things, and I'm about to list them. The thing that stands out about her is she is so social and inclusive. I'm positive. Oh my goodness. Oh, here we go. I'm positive everyone would agree. She's a very welcoming human. The next thing I would like to talk about is she is very motivational. She pushes me to do my best. Holy shit. And I'm happy about that because I'm a pretty successful student because of her. The third thing about her is that she is very helpful. She does many good things and donations all over the world. The fourth thing I would like to say would be that she is a very positive person. She's always telling us to shake it off when we are sad. The fifth, spelled F-I-T-H, fifth thing I would like to say is that she is very generous. She let us go to Europe for an entire month. In my eyes, that is beyond generous. The final thing, so sweet. Sorry. The final thing I would say is that she is athletic. I say that because she attends all of my sports games and gives me feedback and is very functional, which is also spelled in a very cute way, when it comes to sports. So she is a soccer all-star 5 times before she came a club team. The main thing I would say about my mom is that I've never met Gus, and I just met Merritt. I could never be Oprah. The main thing I would say about my mom is that I am proud as heck, and she's a very important person in my life. So,
God, well, thanks, Gus. You really, we said we were going to cry, but right off the bat.
Holy moly. Laminate this, put this somewhere lovely. This is for you, Merritt.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
I am as thrilled to be here with you as Gus is to be your son. So Merritt and I said we've known each other for many years online and in the community, but this was the first time we met, and we got to the green room early, and I feel like I've known her a lifetime already. And now even more so. So I'm glad to welcome you all into this new relationship that is budding. Merritt, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe your professional and, path to parenthood?
Sure. So thank you. And thanks for indulging the 2 pages on the binder paper. I was proud of him. That was his writing exercise. I'm so happy to be here. And like Robin said, to just talk about this, because I think when I joined GitHub, I was one of 5 people that had kids. So not only was I older, but there was not really anybody to connect with to talk about what it meant to be a parent and how it informed not only my personal life, but my professional life. And so I think the amazing thing is this last gig that I had with GitHub, I started 3 months pregnant, and I've written about it, what comes with that, not only having kids and what are the biases and the kind of thinking that people already have, knowing that you come with that. Are you all in, particularly as a woman? Are you going to be all in? Or are you going to say, I have to go mind my family? Are you really that committed to the company? And so I felt really privileged to be in a situation where I could go all in on who I was and to really lean into my identity. And that was being 3 months pregnant, joining a brand new company. And so it's just been a journey, raising 3 kids, and also informed how I wanted the workplace that I want to develop and create. And that is a welcoming environment for people that are parents and that maybe are caring for elderly parents or, parents to their own kids. And so it really has informed who I am as a human, and obviously translates to how I parent my kids. And I think had you asked him to write this, you didn't ask me this, but if he would have written that letter, that bio of me probably, 9 months, 10 months ago, it would have been a lot different, because I now have the privilege of being the CHRO of my family. I stepped away from GitHub about 6 months ago to have the experience that he said, to travel through Europe for 6 weeks and to really be present for my family. So that's my journey. And now I'm here with all of you today.
Well, thank you for that. One question I've kind of been up against recently, I posted something on LinkedIn about working mothers. There was a reflection by an author who was experiencing Serena Williams in the most recent Open and her loss. And she was reflecting on her age and that generation of being a working mother and what that was like for her. And so it touched me personally, and I posted about it. And someone that I really respect challenged me on the title, Working Mother. She said, what's to say that mothers that are home are not working? And I was like, oh shit, hit with my own bias, hit with my own language. And as we know very much, language matters, and title matters, and identity matters. And so as you have transitioned from, this badass who has had, a 10 careers that even just one part of that anyone would be so lucky to be a part of and have for themselves. How has it been transitioning from this massive, corporate executive to then suddenly, tending things in home? And so think about title, think about that transition. Talk to me about your identity.
Yeah, gosh. Yeah, that is the $10 million question. I think it's really hard. I was telling Caitlyn earlier when we were in the green room that I am self-aware enough to know that when I knew that I was going to leave GitHub and I, resigned 3 days after we closed the deal, I knew that I needed some help from a mental wellness perspective, that I knew I wanted to be a lawyer at 7, and I've worked every day except for my first year of law school since I was 15. So I knew that my identity was so inextricably linked with my ability to achieve professional goals. And the personal goals have gone parallel. I knew I wanted to be a mother. I've always known I wanted to have children, but my primary objective has always been very clear and distinct mile markers in the ground. And so when we closed the deal, I'm like, what do I do now? And so that's been a lot of the conversation with my therapist that I found that was amazing about my identity was so tightly wound up in being this corporate person. And I always said GitHub was my 4th child that I never birthed. And how do you unwind all of that? How do you unwind that? And a lot of when we talk about language, and I told Caitlyn I was going to be real about it, like, I wasn't put on this earth to be a stay-at-home mom. And we spent several sessions, and she's like, well, how do we want to come up with another term? Do you want to be called a household engineer? Do you want to be called, what do you want to be called? And there is, for me, I didn't go to college to get an MRS degree. I went to get a double major, and I went to law school to get my GED to go out and effectuate social change. And yes, I find incredible value in raising children. Don't get me wrong. But there is something about also preserving some of that personal with your identity and your achievements. And so I'm still on the journey, and it's, I'm trying to redefine what that means, and I'm trying to find what that next thing is for me. It may not be what I've done for the last, 15 years, and I'm super open to it. So, with each week and each day, I just continue to explore it.
Well, we don't have a ton of time left, because as this interview and around goes, I did want to take 2 seconds and talk about the trip. And so as the CHRO of your family, you have now engineered this incredible experience for them that obviously is impactful, and enough for Gus to have mentioned it. Tell me a little bit about how you designed that for your team, for your family.
I think, being the VP of Employee Experience and Engagement, I went into it with that mindset. How do I want to create the most incredible experience for my family? And I do a lot of writing and journaling. I ended up blogging the whole trip, which I'm not a blogger. But I think the most beautiful part is I set forth 3 goals, because, I am who I am. So I can't go on a trip without having goals. I didn't set goals for myself. I set them for my children. And I said, my goals for them were to experience curiosity, wonder, and to see their faith lived out in other countries. And we blew all 3 of those out of the ballpark. They were all speaking French and German and Italian by the time we came home. Few words. They all ate things beyond cheeseburgers. Amazing. And we had conversations beyond, playground gossip and what NBA player got traded, or how was dad's fantasy football team shaping up. So we talked about meaningful, impactful things. So the goal for me was to help start them, to light a fire, to spark, to ignite them in becoming global citizens in this world. And I created the experience with those goals in mind.
Well, I love this. Kids need OKRs too, people. This is important. Well, Merritt, I have always been a huge fan of yours. I've followed your work for a very long time, so it's an honor and a privilege to share the stage. And thank you so much for blazing the trail for people to be able to re-identify and continue to re-identify themselves as they grow in their caregiving journey. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see how this goes. Okay.
No pressure, right?
None at
You're
all.
warmed up now. You're warmed up. And we got the cheers out of the way, so it's like totally okay.
Good.
All right. So it is my privilege to introduce Michael, and his two daughters wrote his bio. So I'm going to read through them. Here we go. Are we ready? His favorite color is green. His favorite food is alcohol. Not only is it his favorite food, it's also his favorite drink. He does have a driver's license. Super important. He can play drums, even
We have some drums in the back.
we should have had you like lead in the drums in the back. He's half Italian, half American. He loves camping. He likes to do barbecue. I like that. He loves music. He reads lots of books. He learned how to play guitar a little bit, so you could form your own band. I could see you, with like the drums and the
whole thing.
guitar, like yeah. Mm-hmm. You love steak, STAKE. Okay, perfect. We have a cute little dog, but he actually wanted a big dog. He went to the University of Chicago. He, like millions of others, loves the Game of Thrones. He claims he watched Goonies 100 times. We'll get more into that later. He saw a UFO. See, piqued your interest. He likes running. He likes boxing. And his middle name is Joseph. Michael Case.
Thank you.
All right. So we're just going to go with it. You cool? You ready?
Yeah.
Game? All right. So, Dad, what does hearing this word invoke in you right now?
I think of my three girls at first. They're 10, 14, and 17. My oldest lives in Osaka with her mother. So I think about that. But then I also think of I have two dads, and we're going to talk about that in later session on masculinity. But I've been trying to make that my job. And I emphasize trying to do it, right? I think I've worked super hard at work for a long time, pretending that that's actually for my kids. But you make enough money, you don't need to make more, right? And so I think I've been trying. I took 5 months off, like you, around the same time actually, and I just tried to be a dad. Just tried to be there. Not much more.
I love it. And I think we talked briefly last night about, y'all saw the pictures on the stage. You're the only man up here, right? So it's a topic that's not really talked about anywhere, not in tech. And primarily that heavy lifting, on speaking about it has been from women. So I just want to know how you feel about being the only man on this panel and talking about it and kind of being vulnerable to talking about what it means to try to seek that balance and try to be the parent and also provider for your family.
It's a hard thing. My wife doesn't work outside of the house, to use some of the language you used earlier. And so I feel definitely that responsibility of like the breadwinner. I have to make the money, right? I did find it pretty interesting that I don't know if as a panel we didn't think about inviting other men for this, or I don't know if no one else was available or interested even. So I think it's an interesting thing for me to think about how society views how we should be, right? We're kind of torn in two different ways. Where I'm like, I literally have to be the breadwinner. I have to earn the money. I have to show the example to my children of what you can achieve. But then I'm also supposed to do all the stuff at home too. And it's actually pretty hard to do both. And I don't think that men talk about that as much. I think we're just supposed to take it.
Yeah. I mean, it's deep, right? And so I think with that, you have this self-awareness, that that's how you show up to the world. And so being in the role that you serve and the roles that you've had in the past, how does that balance that you're talking about inform the lenses that you use to shape your work, the relationships that you develop professionally, and what you create in the workplace for other men to be able to have these conversations, to create programs that encourage, us to start talking about this and to make it a priority.
I'm not sure I've done enough. I'll tell a little story of when I worked at a company called Uber, like a ride sharing platform. And I had about a 50-person team. So I was bouncing around between here and Mexico City and New York and DC all the time. I was always on a plane. But this was exactly 3 years ago. My wife and kids had just moved here from Tokyo. So, first time going to school in English. My wife had no support. We had no support network in San Francisco. I'd come about 10 months early. And I had a fairly sudden business trip to Sao Paulo, Brazil, which if you think about it, is literally the other side of the world. People forget that it's so far away, right? And I was dealing with a boss who was, it was a rough week. Susan Fowler had written an article that week. So in the HR team, we had a lot going on, a lot of stress for a lot of different people. And my wife had to go out with my other kid, and we had to leave our 7-year-old at home. So I brought an iPad to the airport in the airport lounge, and she was going to be on the iPad at home, and I was going to be on the iPad in the airport lounge. And this way I could watch her, right? Make sure she doesn't start a fire or whatever else kids get up to, right? But then my boss in this hard week decided to join me in the airport lounge and have our long delayed one-on-one right then at like 11 p.m. And also I like to get in line for the plane early, and that was delaying me. So I was trying to watch my kid. He didn't have kids, and Uber was a pretty intense environment. So he kind of just didn't give a shit. Right. And I was trying to do all this at once, and, he was giving me some pretty direct feedback, and I finally got it all done. I'm in the line for the plane. I was so upset that I called my wife, and I cried. And I was like, why am I crying? Like I'm a grown ass man, not supposed to cry in the airport line. Right. But I was so like trying to balance those two things together. And I quit pretty soon after that. And then I went to another company where I again worked super hard and no one had kids. And, so I think now I work remotely now, which is great. I see my kids a lot, and I'm trying to, with the people that we hire for our team, let them be themselves. And that doesn't mean just kids, but make sure they have the opportunity to take care of their families. And look, there's just more important stuff than work, and we forget that, right? Mm-hmm. So I still don't think I've done enough at it, but I think this conversation is a place to start, maybe for lots of folks to think about it.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you for sharing that. So we're going to do a little lightning round, if you're cool with that.
Sure.
Okay. Going to lighten it up a little bit, starting with favorite Goonies character. And I could push you and say why, but maybe I'll go there anyways.
What was the pretty girl? I always liked her, but I'm sure she's my favorite character. I just grew up really liking her.
That was 100 times.
But I related to Mikey. I mean, my name is Michael. It's, he was a little bit weird, and, I think probably a lot of us did, but yeah, I related to Mikey.
Awesome. Go-to words of wisdom for your daughters.
I always tell them just try to be good people, be kind to people. If they want to go and pursue a career, if they want to go to a fancy school, that's great. We're not going to push them, but the biggest thing I think is if they can leave our nest and be kind to people and be good people, I think we've done our best.
Best advice given to a mentee or colleague at work.
Advice that I've given?
Yes.
Ooh.
Or that you've received.
Well, I guess I've given this now that I received it once. It was Instacart's COO, Robbie, told me this. He said, I need to ask for help more. I was trying to do it all on my own. And I think that was only a couple of years ago. So you'd think I would have learned by then.
Yeah.
And so I try to encourage the people that I work with, don't be afraid to put your hand up, right? We don't have to always do it alone.
And I think that's also indicative of being parents, right? We have to ask for help in that space too, right? We don't have all the answers. And I think my hope too is as we start this conversation that we create a network of folks that are open and willing to have conversations about the things that aren't always easy, right?
Yeah, and now when you say it that way, I think I don't even ask my wife for help enough, probably, now that you put it that way.
Most rewarding parenting moment.
Well, that's tough because I don't want to single any one kid out. Um, I'm quite proud of my kids for making the transition to go to school in English and thriving. I think that's kind of astounding.
Awesome. All right, we're gonna lighten it up. Time's about up. Do you have a favorite dad joke? Hashtag dad joke.
Oh,
Come
Kyle, help me
on.
out. All day long I'm telling dad jokes, but I'm on the spot. I don't know. I'm more of a punner.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't have anything punny to say right now.
All
I don't
right.
think so.
All right. We know it's out there, so
but
that'll be follow up from everybody.
Exactly. I'll jump in there.
To ping Michael for a dad joke. Oh,
Good.
there you go. Thank you so much for sharing and giving me the privilege to spend this time with you, and just for being vulnerable and opening up the conversation in a meaningful way.
Well, thank you for sharing your story as well. Appreciate it. Welcome, Natasha.
Thank you so much.
It's good to see you in person. We've talked a lot in the last 6 months, but almost always on the phone.
That's true.
I did get an introduction for you from your kids. Should I start? So this is our Ima, Natasha. She has 2 children who are 9 and 10, and has been married to our Abba, Derek, for 21 years. They are stupid in love. Ima and Abba send us to a good school where we can make a lot of friends. Ima is fun because she gets us board games that keep us busy, and she lets us go to fun places over the weekend. She wakes up at 5 a.m. every day to exercise, and now even teaches spin classes. She takes us to synagogue. She is good at reading, writing, spelling, typing, and doing stuff at App Annie. She is not good at the new math we do today. She says she doesn't know the iPad code, so we don't get to play on the iPad when Abba isn't home. She taught us how to cook and bake, not to be afraid of martial arts, and to take care of our bodies by exercising and eating well. Her favorite things to do are eating cheese, doing spin, and running races. She is a good mom. It's kind of gets you, huh?
Same here.
So you work really hard at work. And we've had a situation where I've been in the car with my kids and you're in the car with your kids, and like we're on the phone trying to work something out, right? At least once that I know for sure. And I want to ask a question that's maybe a little bit, controversial. Why do you work so hard?
I love what I do. I love what I do. And I think my mother has the same habits. Interestingly, she's also an HR person, now retired. So is my father-in-law. But my parents were immigrants. They moved to Canada just before I was born. And I think there is a bit of that immigrant mentality. Also, we were comfortable, but not well off growing up. And I think the living beyond our means, it's there. It's a gremlin on my shoulder that says, keep going. Don't be at anyone else's mercy. Have a side gig, especially in the Bay Area. I heard a lot. I heard an oh yeah.
And that's teaching spin now?
It's for real. Oh yeah, there's that too. And I think that is a big thing for me. I fill the time.
And how do you think that affects your kids? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it neutral?
It's a good question. My daughter, I think, sees it as, well, she can be really successful. My mother was the primary income earner. My father and mother split household responsibilities. That's what we do, although my husband is primary caregiver. That makes it difficult for him when it comes to job search, by the way. I'll put that out there. The schools will call me and I'll be on a plane or unable to answer the phone. And then they don't know what to do. And it took us a few years to get them to call him first. And so now we highlight on the school forms, highlight bright yellow sticky notes, primary contact.
So they defaulted to the mom.
They defaulted to the mom.
Even in the Bay Area, like with the way we are, they still defaulted to the mom.
Yes.
Interesting.
So I think my kids, so I do morning drop off. There are times when I am late for a meeting and it just, we part ways in a less than happy mode, right? Because, I'm late. I'm going to miss the train, or it's going to be an hour and a half to get to the office. This is a problem. I have a call, or I have an interview, I have a meeting. I don't love that. So my partners in crime back at the office, they've put in a commuter cushion for me so that nobody schedules meetings before a certain time. But even then, sometimes there's a morning meltdown or we can't find something. It makes it difficult. And I get home later. So I often miss dinner. I'm not a dinner at home during the work week. I don't remember growing up that way. So to me, it's not as critical, but I am there when it matters. So I am there at every school conference. I call meetings with some of the teachers. Weekends, my husband's he's a golf addict. So at least one day of the weekend, they're all to me. And that's why we do board games or we go on an adventure. I don't love the TV being on and iPads and that sort of thing. And so I use the time that we're together to do things that are going to make us stronger. So my kids have been doing chores for a long time. My son started unloading the dishwasher when he was 3. My daughter, she started doing that when she was 3. So it's important. Cleaning, Swiffering the floors, and a little shout out to the Swiffer people. Mopping the floors and cleaning the bathrooms. We do that together because we take pride in our home. So I want to show them our values that way, but also we go to synagogue. We pray together. We'll sing songs together. We'll do goofball things together. We go hiking. But what I'm trying to show them is you can find joy in places during your day and still have responsibilities. And that is how I grew up. And I guess my parents had a significant influence on me.
Thanks for sharing that. The Swiffer was invented in Japan, by the way.
I love it.
Yeah. How about the opposite? Where you're trying to be a super successful executive in startup land, but things come up, right? We were sitting earlier today, and you got an email interrupting your day from school. How does being an active mom affect your career?
So I've had an interesting journey to parenthood. I had miscarriages, and the first time I was on a leadership team that I'd been on for a few years at that point. I was the only woman on that leadership team, and my colleagues were based mainly outside the U.S. And they were unbelievable. They showered me with love and care, and I didn't want to be on leave. I wanted to be back at work because I wanted some sense of normalcy, and I didn't want to stare at the room that was going to be the baby's room. They were phenomenal, and they knew I wasn't ready to come back to work, but they also didn't make it uncomfortable when I cried. When we adopted my daughter, I was working at a different company, and I took leave. And in New Jersey, I lived in New Jersey at the time. New Jersey and Oregon were the only two states that offered leave for adoptive parents and paid parental leave. And I took my 6 weeks off with my daughter, as I had done with my son. And when I went back to work, I had a meeting with the CEO of this newer company. And he was from Europe originally. And he said, "It's a shame you had to take time off, because now you have to rebuild all the relationships at work." And I did a double take. Wait, what? You're European. Like, did you get a year off? It was a little bit stunning. But I've always been sort of the primary driver in our family. So I have, when I worked at a biotech company, the lab was open. And so we would bake cookies on Thanksgiving. And because it was just after or soon after Halloween, we would often go to the office on Saturday in costume and deliver cookies and stuff for the lab folks. And one day we were I was dressed as Mrs. Incredible, and my kids were dressed as, Violet and Dash. And go Pixar. And the COO showed up, and he didn't even blink. And I'm in costume, right? Mask and all. And hi, Natasha. Hi there. How are you? These are my two kids. And he was so cool about it. And now I have the pleasure, the honor to work in an organization where my boss, the CEO, he gets it. So I gotta go. I gotta take my kid to the doctor, or something's happening at home and it's hard. I'm having a difficult time right now. And Ted is amazing. He is amazing. His own child is grown now, working. All of us on the executive team have children, different ages, but it is okay. It's absolutely okay. My colleagues were all in from all around the world earlier this week, and they wanted to meet my kids. I'm on a conference call at whatever time o'clock, and the kids will wander by in their PJs, and okay, it's time to say hi to Mr. John and say hi to Miss Jan, or we're on the phone in the car. Please say hi to Mr. Michael.
Yep, I've had that. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Last little thing. What if you could tell your kids anything, what would it be? And kids don't always listen when we tell them directly, but for the record, what would you tell them?
Don't be afraid.
That's powerful. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Hi, Tammy.
Hi, how are you? Hello,
Good,
everybody.
thank you. So I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Tammy Sun. Tammy is co-founder and CEO of Fertility. We met, I want to say it was about 18 months ago, thanks to the folks at Sequoia who were co-hosting an event.
And People Tech, yeah.
And People Tech, yeah. Tammy has a really interesting background. She's worked in both public and private sector. She was on the partnerships team at Evernote. She was an Obama appointee at the Federal Communications Commission, and she has worked in politics and nonprofits before that. What I'll add is my own 2 cents here. Tammy is a forward-thinking leader. She looks to make the world around her a better place. You can see from her history and where she's worked and the types of things she's done. But even now, with Fertility, she's looking for ways to expand the reach, to make things better for people who are thinking about whether or not they want to build a family. And she has a very generous heart. She wants to be a better leader, and she's working on that every day. So it's a pleasure to speak with you this morning.
Thanks, Natasha. Thanks so much.
So Tammy, we've had people up on stage who have children. How about you?
I do not have any kids. I have 12 frozen eggs in the basement of both UCSF Fertility Center as well as PFC in San Francisco. That's actually how I ended up starting the company. I had decided at some point, and at the time when I decided to pursue that treatment, fertility preservation, commonly known as egg freezing, had just become sort of an unexperimental treatment. It had become available across 550 or so fertility clinics across the country. And it was something I decided to pursue for my own health. Ended up paying for it out of pocket because I walked into the clinic, put down my insurance card. It was rejected. Insurance actually doesn't cover fertility in most cases. Swapped it out for my credit card. $40,000 and 3 rounds of egg freezing later, I got 12 eggs. So, that sort of was the beginning of when I started to think about fertility as not really even a family issue and not really even as a women's health issue, but as an issue that is relevant to all human beings. Fertility is often thought about as women's health or femtech in many ways. And even in the public discourse, I think talked about in that way. And what we believe and what I believe is that fertility is a fundamental part of human health and that people of all genders, men, women, and others have different ways, complex ways of thinking about and managing their fertility care.
So, Tammy, when you think about that person who is trying to figure out what to do, what's your approach? What's your goal?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think most people might sort of think about Carrot as, our approach is about helping you be a parent. Our approach is about families and building families, and that happens a lot within our membership and within our customers. But the way that I think about this is it's kids and babies and frozen eggs. They're sort of a byproduct of what our company and our product does, which is it's really about the user. It's about the member. What is it that you want in order for you to design your life? What are the tools and the things that you need in order to design your life in the way that you think is best for the world? And so sometimes that might involve having kids and having a family. Sometimes it might involve preserving that option for the future. Sometimes it might involve not having kids at all. And so whatever it is that you need, our job is to help you pursue that. We don't promise a path to parenthood. We don't promise parenthood. Nobody can. No provider, no doctor, no one can guarantee anything. Fertility treatments are not an insurance of any kind. But everyone should have equal access to the tools and the support that they need to pursue those things that they think are best for how they want to design their lives.
So when you made the choice to freeze your eggs, did you tell people?
No. The world has changed a lot since then, and it's only been a few years. Back then there was still a ton, I think there still is a ton of stigma around fertility issues. Egg freezing has become much more part of sort of the mainstream conversation and the consumer conversation. At the time, there was still sort of an ick factor related to fertility treatments and egg freezing in particular. So I didn't talk about it at all. I talked about it with sort of a close group of family and friends. And the truth is that there was like a little bit of shame around having the treatment. It's like, well, what happened? Why don't you have kids? What is the reason that you're doing this? Are you sure it's even going to work? But I think what we're proud of at Carrot and what I think is good in the world because of companies and organizations like this and folks who are employers in many cases who are on the front lines of this is that people do feel much more comfortable. This topic is much less isolating because companies are beginning to offer it as a benefit, because there are many more sort of products that are directly available to consumers where it sparks that conversation. So I think there's been a lot of really rapid progress in the past few years so that people have more options to be able to communicate with more people about what is a normal part of healthcare, which is, how are you going to treat your fertility?
And so you work with all sorts of people, right? Your customers, your clients are all walks of life, all kinds of families, single partners, already have children, don't know if they want children. What's the common thread that comes through?
I think that's exactly right. And the sort of the complexity of these experiences is worth spending a minute on, because I think when people think about fertility treatments or IVF, there's really sort of one story that is typically associated with it. In the past couple of years, there's been an additional story about egg freezing and the type of person who's looking for egg freezing. But there's so many different types of ways that people pursue parenthood these days, in so many different sort of types of families. We support single intending parents. We support opposite sex couples who are going through infertility. We support and see, a really incredible rise in same-sex family forming and family planning, where access not just to IVF is important, but donor material, donor eggs, donor sperm, and then also access to legal services where adoption may be necessary in order for one of those parents to secure parental rights after the child is born. So there's a lot of different ways that fertility treatments are being used by people these days, and not just one path around infertility. And I think the common thread that we see in our membership and within our customers is that it really still is such a black box for almost every single person who touches that system of healthcare. And part of it is because of the stigma around it that has really been pervasive for more than 40 years since IVF was invented. But no matter where people start, in almost every case, the sort of initial interaction with that aspect of healthcare is startlingly stressful and confusing, and it is very much still a black box. So we have a lot of work to do in that area.
So when Tammy and I first met, I told her my story, and I've gone through everything. So, and we'll talk about that more tomorrow in one of the breakouts. But one of the things that was challenging was the source of truth, right? So when we were going through IVF and IUI, there was information from the physician that we were working, the specialist, and we had great specialists. Then later on, when we were pursuing gestational carrier, then you're dealing with attorneys, and it's overwhelming. And finally, when we decided to adopt, and then we adopted internationally, there's complexity in there too. The stuff on the web is just awful. There are books that are not very helpful. And then there are some places to go, but they're hard to find. The navigating, that part, it's emotionally draining. Couple that with being on medication if you're pursuing fertility treatments and you're not yourself. So how are you thinking, having gone through egg freezing yourself and your own battery of needles, how do you find that the people who work with Carrot Fertility are coping, and how are you helping them to get through it in a smoother way?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, most people struggle first and foremost with just the ability to afford this type of care. If their company doesn't offer it as a benefit, it's, it is at minimum thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, which causes a lot of stress and anxiety in the first place. But even the financial benefit isn't enough. What is that? Necessary, but not sufficient. The navigation, I think that was your word, and we built our product is called Care Navigation, is just reducing the amount of time that you spend on the internet. When I went through fertility treatments, I spent I think it was hundreds of hours reading everything from blog posts to, very scientific papers to, interviewing doctors and things like that. And so the sector is sort of set up in a way where it's very difficult to understand where is an unbiased opinion. And that's sort of the second problem after affordability is where can I get information that is a source of truth that I trust, that is unbiased, and unbiased meaning not tied to sort of any other financial incentive, like who's on my side here. And so that's what we have designed and try to provide is that, our business, our goal and our mission is only for the user. It is all about you as a member and what it is you need to get to your next step with absolutely no judgments about what that next step might be. We talk very sort of evenly about what are the risks and what are the possibilities and probabilities. There's, I think it's important not to talk about certain things like egg freezing as an insurance policy. And we don't say that because there is no guarantee of a payout. There's no guarantee that something that you will have a baby. But we will be there with you in the pursuit of that goal. And so it's the pursuit that is the verb that we think is important.
And I love that you use the word evenly, having that conversation in balance.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much, Tammy. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. Oh, did I start? Okay, yeah. Caitlin.
Hi, Tammy.
Hi.
I'm back. The room's
We are-
gotten bigger, so this
it's
is like
full
being
circle.
welcomed into the back end of a conversation, isn't it?
I know. Caitlin Holloway. Caitlin is I won't do the additional introduction, but as you guys remember from the start of the program, the vice president of people at Reddit. And I honestly have been an admirer and continue to be an admirer of yours in this space. I think you are one of just the leading voices within our community about how to really think about these topics in a way that is both human and supports the business. So I have some notes here. Okay, so here is the introduction of Katelyn by Luca. And the first thing I will ask the audience to join me is to say happy birthday, because today is Mama's birthday. According to Luca, Mom is 60 years old.
Look good for 60.
Her favorite color is blue, not red. Red is gross. Good thing he's not here. Mama is a star child like me. We were born on Pluto.
Who knew?
Wait, we're actually witches, but she says that's a secret, so keep that to yourselves.
Don't tell anyone.
And work, Mama works with Snoo, as we know, and she plays with me and Juno. That's very sweet.
I really wasn't sure what he would say when I said, what is like, it was really hard. I think that Robin had the same experience. So, trying to solicit from a 5-year-old, like, what do I do all day? And he went, I don't know. We're witches. Great. Awesome.
Well, Caitlin, thanks for being here. One of the things that I noticed in recent months was a really interesting and impressive article in one of the regional papers in the Bay Area, one of the top regional papers in the Bay Area, about something super interesting and new and innovative that Katelyn had done at Reddit. And it's a sensitive topic for, I think, even general conversation, but even especially at work. And so it's an interesting taboo to break. You have introduced miscarriage leave.
It's true.
And I think this group would be super interested, and it would help this group to know, how did that happen? How did that come about? How did it become a workplace policy? And what was the instigator of that?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So it got the name miscarriage leave, but it's really a loss of pregnancy leave, which is a little bit more inclusive because it covers abortion as well. And that's also a very taboo topic and something difficult to talk about in the workplace. I would start by saying, one of my foundational principles, I'll back up even further. So I like to say that I'm not a classically trained HR lady. I got into the work as kind of a natural evolution through a number of different careers, a number of different employers. And my common denominator always ended up being people. And so what I love is supporting and amplifying others to do not only their best work, but to really thrive, have an incredible work experience. We spend so much of our days at work with our colleagues, with our employers. And the reality is what we are leaving behind are our friends and our families, and we should make that worthwhile. We want to make that great. And not just the product or the output of our business or our companies. You want to put goodness into the world by inviting and accepting these other people into your world and have a space that's safe enough to do so. And so when I first started thinking about benefits, so I've been in the people space now for not quite 10 years. And one of the first things I started kind of questioning as an end user, as a client, was benefits. You sold me on this shit. I signed up as a candidate and I was like, okay, so this is a part of my compensation. So I get this, and this. Okay, well, I can only actually access this and this, not all this other stuff. So why are you selling it as a part of my comp when I can't access it? So my foundation philosophy as I think about benefits are, how can we really support people to take advantage of them? So I need them to be inclusive. So what's to say your family is like mine? So if we're zooming in on the topic of family planning or family expansion or parental inclusion or any of these things, families come in such a variety these days, which is I take it back. They've always been beautiful and wild and colorful, but the workplace has only recognized them as something that is very, very specific and has traditionally been very exclusive. And so thinking about, creating an inclusive platform for people to engage in the way that makes sense for them and their families. The second one is flexibility. So, there's this arms race for how much time does your company give off for parental leave? Is it for just mothers? Is it for fathers? What does it look like? And at the end of the day, it feels good to say, my company offers the most possible time off. When the reality is that might not be what everyone needs or wants. It doesn't start and stop there. It's about flexibility. How can I use that time? How can I use that space? Can I take some time off and then maybe spread the rest out through the rest of the year? In my household, my husband is our primary caregiver. He's an entrepreneur that works from home. And so he has the flexibility that, maybe I don't. And so how do we share that time? What does that look like for our home? And then at the end of the day, you have to follow through. So it's not just put it in your book and move on and let people tick the box of engagement. But really, it's about how can we can continuously support you in your goals and your efforts as a whole human. Sorry.
I just want to say, I think just listening to you sort of talk about your approach to how you design culture, how you design people teams, it's very obvious to me how somebody at your company might feel comfortable coming up to you and saying, this is something that I need. And I just wanted to pause and say that because that doesn't happen very often.
Well, thank you. And that's my goal. That's what I would hope. And that's where half of my harebrained policies come from. actually, are from specific circumstances. It was like, oh my gosh, I hadn't even considered that. And heaven forbid someone else is going through something similar. So miscarriage leave or loss of pregnancy leave, ironically, much like Natasha, who thank you so much for your bravery for sharing about your own fertility journey. This shit ain't easy. The way I was built, I thought, my God, I could bring a whole village back from war and famine. Jiminy Christmas, let's go. And I was taught my whole life, don't even get in a hot tub with a boy. And I mean, the reality is it took a long time. And it took not only a long time to get the cycles and the timing and the weather and everything in the right spot, but the reality is that even once you think that you have maybe conceived, there's a chance that that's not a guarantee. Mm-hmm. And so going through a loss myself, I actually had suffered 2 miscarriages before Luca, my star child, came into this world. And one of those miscarriages I actually suffered at work. I was a brand new executive working for a company that I loved and adored. I felt incredibly supported. I had, I call so many of them my dear friends to this day. I was working really late. We had a board meeting, and so I was there prepping, and the only one that was there was the janitor. And it was early in my pregnancy, so no one at work knew. People didn't even know that I was struggling with fertility or that I was trying to expand my family. And I stood up to pack up and go home for the evening, and I felt a rush and looked down, and I just knew it was warm and not good. I fell to the ground and started sobbing, and the janitor rushed up, and bless her heart, she helped me to the bathroom to wash out my clothes. And all I could think was, oh, fuck, I have this board meeting tomorrow. What am I going to do? And so I think that the balance of career and being a goddamn human are 2 very hard things to marry sometimes. And it's funny because even though I felt so supported, so deeply supported by my colleagues at work, and when I finally shared with my boss what had happened, it was after the board meeting. I waited for everything to land where it needed to land, and then I shared with him, even though I consider him a very dear and close friend. And his response was overwhelmingly positive and supportive. And he said, well, do you need some time? I was like, no, I'm good. I'm fine. Forget about it. Let's move on. The policy didn't even come from that. That just was an experience. That was a part of my journey into parenthood. I thought that was a private, personal thing that was mine alone. That was my cross to bear. And it was my job to get my shit together and get that board deck ready. So no, the miscarriage leave, the loss of pregnancy leave actually has only come about fairly recently at Reddit. We had a fertility luncheon for our ladies because obviously I have no problem being an open book and having open dialogue. And so we had our women of Reddit, and we were talking about fertility and our ages. We have a very diverse workforce. And so some folks are thinking about perimenopause and menopause, and others are thinking about, oh my gosh, I don't even have a boyfriend. How can I even think about starting a family? So it was a lovely conversation around fertility. And I casually said, oh, we have a loss of pregnancy leave, right? And the room looked at me and they were like, what? And I was like, oh, by the way, it's in our handbook, which no one ever reads. And so what had occurred to me a few years ago was it really is no one's business unless you want it to be theirs. And so I wanted to create a safety net for women to be able to come and speak only to one person in HR and say, hey, I'm dealing with some stuff. And so our policies actually cover things like you and Natasha were talking about, like fertility. And maybe you are going through IVF. Those drugs do some insane things to your bodies. And so you don't want the world to know. You don't need the world to know. And maybe you do, but that's your choice. And so the point of these policies and practices and philosophies that I try to build within my organizations are really about space to choose and air coverage. I want air coverage.
It's incredible. I mean, I think oftentimes when you're the first to do something, there's you can get a lot of extreme reaction. So like absolute evangelical support for what you're doing. And sometimes people will have a negative reaction and get upset. Did that happen at all? Was there a, whoa, why are we doing that from a couple of people? And I only say that because in the early days of egg freezing as a benefit, there was evangelical support, but then there was a little bit of sort of controversy around, well, should companies be getting involved and why are they doing this? So I'm just curious, like, how have you handled that? And it's just a function of being first and being a leader.
I appreciate you saying that. I think that the only naysayers I've experienced are people who think that it's a recruiting technique. It's a tactical recruiting. Like, oh, okay, you are obviously focused on, demographic X, Y, or Z for your diversity inclusion dashboard that you've open sourced and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, I want my people to feel safe and comfortable. And by the way, it doesn't just apply to women. To your point of fertility and healthcare, this is a human issue. What about the fathers and the secondary parents, or I take issue with that label as well, but maybe the person who isn't carrying the child or experiencing the loss, you have somebody that is also experiencing that loss, even though it wasn't in their body. So yes, this policy applies to everyone.
Wow, thank you so much. Thanks for your leadership. And I think I'm way over time. Sorry about that. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.